Welcome to Scene Change, a podcast by the National Federation of the Blind Performing Arts Division. All about equality, opportunity, accessibility, and the arts. Here, you'll learn adaptive techniques from performers in the know. We are changing what it means to be blind, one stage at a time. Thank you for joining us today. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Scene Change. I'm Lizzie Muhammad Park, the Vice President of the National Federation of the Blind Performing Arts Division, and your host of the show. We have a very interesting episode for you today. Krishna Washburn is a professional ballet dancer, and she's the artistic director and sole teacher of Darkroom Ballet. This is an online ballet course specifically for blind dancers. She's got something for everyone. She's got intro courses. They are 8 weeks long. And she also has open courses for experienced blind professionals. They are tuition free. So if you're interested in ballet, I strongly recommend that you reach out to her. Her summer course is beginning on June 25th, and registration closes on June 18th. So we're actually putting this episode out a bit earlier so that anyone who's interested can actually get in there before registration closes. Now, she's highly qualified to teach these courses. She's danced with several prestigious companies, has a master's in education, and also has multiple certificates from the American College of Sports Medicine. She's also blind herself. I'm so glad to interview her today and welcome her to the show. Welcome to the show, Krishna.
Thank you so much for inviting me on the show, Lizzie. It is such a pleasure to be here. I would also just like to add that I have with me today the Darkroom Ballet Program Coordinator and Lead Administrator, and also my dearest friend in my heart of hearts, Alejandra Ospina. She's also here with us today.
Welcome, Alejandra.
Thank you so much for having me.
So glad to have both of you with us. But before we get started, Krishna, I mentioned just about all of your educational background, except for one, which I've purposely saved for last. I did not know that you attended Barnard College in New York.
That is
a Seven Sister.
I mean, about 7,000 years ago, but yes, I did.
No matter. You know what? No, once a Seven Sister, always a Seven Sister in my book. I went to Bryn Mawr, so that is very close to my heart. And I said, oh, well, I see why we hit it off from the very beginning. Now, this audience knows that it's possible to dance ballet as a blind person. We've interviewed 3 ballet dancers in the past, but what we've not done is interviewed a ballet instructor. Could you just give us some insight, just an overview of what the process is for teaching Darkroom Ballet? I know you send out some vocabulary ahead of classes. You send out the Zoom link. You make space for a Q&A. Just tell us what it's like from your end.
Well, the most important thing to recognize is that my job is not a common one. There are not many blind and visually impaired dance educators, and there is a huge amount of structural ableism that prevents there from being more. And I personally came up against a lot of that in my efforts to get Darkroom Ballet off the ground. Now, I have been teaching without any breaks really since the start of the pandemic, but prior to that, rarely would I have an opportunity to teach more than maybe 3 or 4 classes at a time for any given institution, and never really had opportunities to develop these long, well-developed relationships with students to help them learn and grow in their careers. So I just want to say that it's lonely. It's lonely not having a large number of blind dance education colleagues to confer with. What I will say is, because I do have a specific educational background and I've actually studied education, most people who teach ballet do not have studies in education at all. Unless they're teaching in like a public elementary school, they will not have studied, like human cognition or development or things like that. And also, I have had training in human anatomy and biomechanics through the American College of Sports Medicine, which is also something that most dance instructors don't have. A lot of dance instructors don't even know which muscles and which bones cause what movements. So what you're planning on describing to your student in terms of what to feel and what to use is actually inaccurate. So I feel like in some ways I have advantages in terms of developing curriculum because I just have more background knowledge. All of my curriculum is designed for adults who are blind or visually impaired. There is no advantage to being able to see in my class. All you need to be able to do is listen, think, and know what you understand and what you don't understand. That's where question and answer time comes in. If you can trust yourself to be able to separate what you're learning into those two categories, this is what made sense to me today. This is what feels right to me today. This is what doesn't make sense to me today. This is where my metacognition recognizes a gap. You talk to me and we work things through kind of like a conversational Socratic style of learning, which has actually been shown through educational research to be the best way of absorbing complex information. I think that the tradition of ballet teachers yelling at a student and telling them that they're making a mistake is probably the least effective way of helping a person learn. But because I literally cannot do that, that is really the majority of where the prejudice has come from in terms of whether institutions would employ me as a dance educator, because I do not have the capacity to yell at a student and say, hey, you're doing it wrong. But that's not an effective way of helping somebody learn anyway.
So I am not a blind person. I'm a sighted person, but I'm a wheelchair user. And my formative experiences with Krishna have been in the world of physically integrated dance. We worked together with the company for a while. And Krishna often says that she's doing this work so that she can eventually replace herself.
Yes, that's correct.
Lizzie, you mentioned that you have spoken to other blind or visually impaired dancers, but this is the first time you have spoken to a blind dance instructor, and that's because there aren't really that many around as far as we know in the English-speaking world. And certainly not that many who are doing this instruction entirely over Zoom. Krishna provides this instruction without being able to see or give tactile correction. But before the pandemic, she was teaching in person here in New York and was also, again, not giving tactile corrections. And I don't exist as a sighted person to assist with that process at all. And what students learn very quickly over time is that it's not needed. Most students don't dance with their cameras on, but sometimes when they are on, it's very clear to me as sometimes the only sighted person in the virtual room that the instruction is understood, that the corrections are understood, and that being able to process visual information really has no bearing on what you're learning. And it's really true, especially for students who have never taken any kind of dance before. Regardless of your age, if you've never done this before, Krishna really means it when she says that no prior knowledge is required. Our students, again, our adult students, but they've run the gamut from like 18 to 75 throughout the blind community across the United States and across several countries and time zones. So it really is for everyone. We have folks who have taken the introductory classes more than once, and they are free classes. And there's a very specific reason why that is that I think I will let Krishna address.
Yeah, I make sure that my classes are always tuition free. That is a really, really important part of my educational philosophy. I recognize in the development of my curriculum, especially my introductory level curriculum, that a lot of blind and visually impaired people have experienced what I call education denial, meaning that somebody else decided for you that you either did not need to learn something, that you could not learn something, or that it would be not worth the time to teach you something, even if it was something incredibly important, like the nature of your own human body. I do not believe in denying education to anybody. That's why my class is and will always be tuition free. I think that it is the idea that people have to pay money for the educational failings that we as a global culture have as it relates to the education of disabled people. I think that that's one of like the worst moral wrongs that could possibly exist.
I wanted to point out as well that our registration deadline for our introductory classes, the classes start on June 25th. The deadline is on June 18th. Krishna is also giving an audio description workshop on June 18th. So the podcast will make it out under that wire. It won't make it out under the wire for our June 11th, what we call butt class workshop.
Yes. Can I talk about this, Alejandra?
Please, yes, do.
Part of the other kinds of classes that Darkroom Ballet offers is a series called No Diagram Anatomy. And No Diagram Anatomy is a movement-based anatomy education series. I have taught quite a few No Diagram Anatomy classes since I started. I think that we're on class number like 8 or 9 now. I have had classes that were based in like very general concepts, like how does the motor neuron innervate muscle tissue? How can you sense that? How does that knowledge influence the way that you move and dance? But I'm in a series now that I like to call Nitty Gritty, and it is a very intense, in-depth, and specific analysis of very, what I consider important and mysterious body parts. And that includes your butt, because nobody talks about butts. And I would say that if you actually understand how to sense what's going on in terms of the nerves, muscle, bone, fascia in the gluteal complex, pretty much all movement becomes much, much easier, especially if you are like a lot of the folks listening here today, and like myself, balancing without sight. You have to get to know your butt. So over the course of 2022 and into 2023, I'm going to be offering classes about specific body regions in No Diagram Anatomy. Another kind of class that I teach with relative frequency are classes relating to self audio description and the different kinds of self audio description. I use 2 types of self audio description in general. The kind that people are most familiar hearing from me is what I call pedagogical self audio description. I talk about how I am moving to help a student learn how to also move in that way. But these workshops actually explore much more what I would call artistic self-audio description, or by another little name that I like to give it, blind movement art. When we as blind artists can create movement art experiences for one another, we are our own creators and our own audience. It's a very different approach to movement audio description. I'm very, very passionate about it. And I have other arts projects related to advancements in audio description for dance, which I might talk about as well today.
Wow, I have so many questions just based on what you just said, and not even including my original questions. But I'll just start with a few just really simple ones. So, are your other courses no diagram anatomy, audio description, etc.? Are they also tuition free, and can people sign up in the same way that they would sign up for your intro and open ballet classes?
I want to do this one.
Go ahead, baby. Go ahead.
I'm going to be administrative. So in general, yes, we strive to keep all of our courses tuition free, particularly for blind and visually impaired students. Although sighted students are welcome, particularly in the workshops. The intro classes we very specifically keep for blind and visually impaired students only. But Krishna feels it's important to include sighted people, especially those who are sighted teachers of dance and movement, in the workshops. But those workshops are also no previous experience required. And yes, to register or to learn about any of Krishna's workshops or regular classes, you just have to go to darkroomballet.com. And I've hopefully laid things out there in a way that is screen reader friendly. I welcome feedback on that. But yes, all you have to do is go to darkroomballet.com to find out more and to learn how to register for workshops or weekly classes, which are the intro level class starting June 25th. And there is actually an ongoing open level class for folks who have some experience or who have finished at least one cycle of Krishna's introductory level class.
Monday nights forever and ever.
The classes are free, but it does obviously cost Krishna time and effort put into this curriculum. We are sponsored by a local organization called Movement Research, and they provide a lot of support. But folks who are interested and able to make a donation are also welcome to do that on darkroomballet.com, in particular to support one of the other projects that Krishna is interested in mentioning, which is a film project based on dance and audio description.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that information. It's definitely worth checking out Darkroom Ballet's website. And yes, Alejandra, from what I have seen, it is quite screen reader friendly. I just want to jump into a little bit of the history of Darkroom. Krishna, you told me that this was something that was started around the pandemic. Is that right?
The way that I currently teach, yes.
Mm-hmm. And then could you just tell us a little bit about how it began, this way that you're currently teaching? And I know everyone had to pivot to Zoom, but sort of maybe some of the differences that you've noticed pre-pandemic versus now. Just anything that you'd like to say about teaching in this style.
I actually really love teaching on Zoom. I just want to make that really clear. I love having students from far and wide coming to study with me, because I do know that there aren't really people teaching courses like mine locally. Mine is a very different kind of class for very specific reasons. I started working on the curriculum for Darkroom Ballet, I would say probably around 2012, 2013. And like I said, I had incredibly strong pushback from institutions and organizations, even institutions and organizations that were blind and visually impaired oriented, like did not have interest in what I was doing. I was definitely thought of as, I don't know, not to be taken seriously, I guess I'll say, in the most charitable way. I have taught, like, you know, a couple classes here, a couple classes there. The biggest change that I found at the start of the pandemic was, without question, a change in the zeitgeist, in the way we think about the value of disabled people. I think there was a very particular window of time at, I would say, like the darkest moments of the American pandemic here, like, you know, in New York City, especially, where a lot of people were forced to think about disabled people for the first time. And I honestly think that I noticed a change in the way that people would interact with me and people would speak to me, and the way that they would think about what it was that I was trying to do. Most people had a very difficult idea comprehending that I teach a pre-professional course. I don't teach a recreational course. Like, this is not dance therapy. Dance therapy is incredibly important. Like, I take dance therapy. That's not what I do. This is not recreation. This is not cute. This is real learning that happens in the dark room. And I really believe that people started to think about me and the work that I do and my mission and my purpose differently. I started out working on an NEA grant from a previous employer, a previous dance company where I was principal for a number of years. That gave me a little bit of money to get started and, like, buy this very beautiful microphone that I'm using today. I applied for a SOS grant, which I did win, and I installed a professional 6-foot by 6-foot dance floor in my kitchen. And I built a little plinth out of a clothes hamper and some books for my laptop so that I could broadcast correctly. My husband Jonathan and I did tests to figure out, you know, what was the way to get around Zoom's limitations in terms of audio, that we could manage to have the best possible quality audio. Because in my class, one of the most important characteristics is that my voice and the music are happening simultaneously. And we discovered that by using a bidirectional microphone and having a single source audio from our kitchen, using like a guitar amp speaker, and like his computer is playing the music, my computer is capturing through the microphone my voice on one side of the mic and the music on the other side. If we would take like a half an hour before class and level the volume for every single song we were about to use in advance of class, like, that this was something that was going to work. This was going to be something actually that sounded really good. We actually have a couple students who like to come and join the Zoom early and give us some help. Shout out to Andre, to make sure that everything is sounding good in terms of leveling. Jonathan is adjusting the volume throughout the song, all through class, to make sure that my voice and the music are always in perfect balance, so you have no distractions. It has been just the greatest joy for me to teach remotely. I don't even know how many people I've taught at this point. Like, this, it's definitely over 100.
Yeah, we're in the hundreds now.
Yeah, we're in the hundreds of people I've taught, and they come from everywhere. Right now, I have a whole bunch of Canadian people in my class. It's so wonderful.
Yeah, we've got a Toronto crew. We've had folks in Turkey and India, and a dear friend in Italy. What I want to point out is that this is an enormous amount of work that Krishna puts into classes as a professional blind dancer and teacher. And as she mentioned, it's a pre-professional program. That doesn't mean that she's expecting people to become professional dancers. It just means that, well, okay, I see that. I see you pointing at me. Interrupt me.
I really wanted to design a course that would have been what I wanted to study as I returned to dance after vision loss.
That's right.
And yes, that's what I really wanted to do. So whether somebody comes to me with aspirations of becoming a performer or a dance educator, or they really just want to learn dance in a serious way, all of those things are valid, and I treat every single student equally. Everybody deserves my time. Everybody deserves my respect. I think that being treated that way by a teacher is a rare thing. And I think that that's unfortunate that it is a rare thing.
And I will say that it might sound intimidating for some folks, but again, we put a lot of effort into resources. Everyone who comes to intro class, for example, for 8 weeks, will get a video of the class that they participated in 1 to 3 days after the class so that they can review it before the next class. We are very slowly working on an audio-only ballet dictionary that is recorded by one of our students, Krishna, and it's meant to be, I think, the first really student-oriented ballet dictionary that will also be more friendly for blind and visually impaired students.
Oh, can I add to that? I wrote all these definitions myself.
Yes, you did.
Mostly because I was doing research using the dance dictionaries that already exist on the internet. And I knew that those definitions were not meant for students. They were meant for choreographers and teachers who already really knew what those words mean. They are not helpful for beginner students who are learning dance for the first time at all. So I acknowledged that I was going to need to write these definitions myself. So I think it's particularly interesting that perhaps the first student-oriented dance dictionary on the internet is going to come through a disability arts project. I think that that's such, you know what? It's just meant to be that way.
I agree. And sometimes I think that a student's experience can really add to another student's learning experience. It sounds like, Krishna, you've had maybe some less than positive dance experiences in the past. And so from what I'm picking up is that you kind of said, I'm not going to be the type of person who yells, not, maybe not just because I'm blind, but also just because, I'm not that kind of person. You know what I mean? Is that right?
There are, I don't know. I think about ballet as a tool more than anything else. It's an artistic tool. It's like the alphabet. It's like clay. It is a system of movement that prioritizes balance over any other movement characteristic. That's what ballet is. And I really feel like if you think about it that way, anybody can use it. It's public domain. It's hundreds of years old. Anyone can use it in any way that they want. And yet, there are all of these stereotypes about what ballet is and is supposed to be, and what ballet culture is and what it's supposed to be. And I really stand opposed to a lot of that. I've spoken to people, both disabled and non-disabled people, who have had very negative educational experiences in movement. And what that really does is it really damages people's confidence and their sense of self-worth. And there's really no reason to do that. It doesn't actually help a person learn to feel bad about themselves. I think that a lot of that sort of aggressive style of belittling people and diminishing people is what teachers have had to resort to because they don't have an educational background to draw from. to actually help students learn. They would rather, than preserve their own personal ego by, saying something that makes that student feel small and insignificant, than by trying to learn, well, how do people actually learn? How could I actually help this student? There's also just a culture of, choreographer dancer relationships in ballet and all other forms of dance, which I find highly problematic. Dancers are oftentimes thought of as instruments or disposable, and that they just exist in order to actualize the concept in the mind of the choreographer. And agency is not given to the dancer. Voice is not given to the dancer. And there's this system in place where, dancers are not allowed to complain because they could be replaced so quickly. And they're supposed to feel grateful for being treated very badly. I stand very opposed to all of those things. It's also one of the reasons why I don't ask my students to give me anything in return. Like, I don't have any performance component. I don't have any exams. I just exist to help people learn continuously over time.
I love that, learning for learning's sake.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of that. Now, I do want to ask you, you mentioned about ballet and balance. You also mentioned about your butt class.
Yes.
And so you mentioned a bit about the sort of differences between sighted and blind balance. Could you tell us more about that?
Sure. Oh, this is my favorite topic. Okay. When a person can see, their primary organ of balance is their eyes. When a person cannot see, they need to balance differently. In a lot of ballet training, there is an encouragement for dancers to actually place their torso weight over the front half of the foot. Biomechanically, that's actually quite bad for you, as well as quite bad for your feet and knees. And you really need to be able to stare in order for that balancing to work out. When you balance internally, the balancing point is at the very back of the heel. In fact, it's where your Achilles tendon, which is that hard, plasticky feeling piece of connective tissue that runs up the back of your heel into your calf muscle, where that meets with the tissue of your heel on the floor. And when you get used to feeling that, it almost feels like it's a little coin-sized circle that you can ground into the floor. And every class begins with the posture check. Do I feel my torso being held up by my heels? Is the front of my feet calm? Do I feel my Achilles tendons reaching down? Are my inner thigh muscles active and awake and reaching toward one another? Is the front of my pelvis tall? Are my rotators at the back of the pelvis on and reaching in towards the midline of the body? That's where butt class comes in. Also getting used to sensing whether there is enough core muscle activated to really stabilize the lower back system, where there's only muscular stability. There's really not skeletal stability there. To sense whether the upper arm bone is being held neutral in the shoulder socket. To sense, am I putting tension into my jaw or my face when that energy should be placed elsewhere? That concept of, can I even sense the crown of my head reaching upward as the backs of my heels reach down? That's where our posture comes from. In darkroom ballet, we have a tool, is called the taped floor. It replaces the mirror as the tool we use to keep track of direction. And we train our feet to sense and trace that tape stripe on the floor. So we can change directions and get a sense of ourselves in space. Our whole sole of the foot really becomes highly sensitized, like really knowing, like, I have grounded this heel. It's really holding my torso up. That means I can switch onto my other leg, or I can lift that leg. I can kick that leg. My torso is stable enough that my leg can be kicked and my torso will not destabilize and cause me to lose balance. All of these things are so teachable and so practicable and so learnable. The idea that blind and visually impaired people cannot master balance is incredibly untrue and such a bad stereotype.
I 100% agree. You did mention tape on the floor, and I've heard about that technique. But then you also mentioned the sole of your foot becoming very sensitive to that. Do students need to purchase ballet shoes before taking intro, or?
I don't require that, but you cannot take class barefoot. You will stick to the floor. I usually just say, like, if you are not up for buying technique shoes yet, just wear regular socks. Ballet includes a lot of friction creating movements on the floor. If you're barefoot, you're going to come up against discomfort and possibly injury of your ankle or knee. So you want to be able to slide around. Your foot's going to be sliding around a lot.
I see. And about the tape, with students, is there a special tape that students need to purchase before the class, or?
Well, this is a truth. Everybody will, over the course of time, figure out what their own favorite tape is. I know what my favorite tape is, but it took me a long time to really test things out and figure out what I like. I like a very narrow tape. I like a 1-inch wide gaffer tape. I buy specifically Blick brand fluorescent orange gaffer tape. Some students prefer a wider tape. They like 1.5 inches, or they like a 2-inch. Some students prefer a very highly textured tape. They'll like a painter's tape or a masking tape, or even like a duct tape. It really depends on the person. It will probably take trial and error for each person to really figure out what tape they like the best. I tell them what I like, but I also let them know, like, that's not the be all end all. Every dancer's needs are unique. Our skeletal proportions are different. Our lived experiences are different. And what feels best to you, that's something you will discover over time.
I know that you like the orange tape because you're able to perceive it a little bit.
Yeah, I have if I stick it in there, I get it. And I do have some students who are low vision or partials, and I've heard that the orange shows up on camera quite well.
It does. And I know that, again, the tape is meant to be a replacement for the visual feedback of a mirror. The tape is giving you feedback in your feet, your toes, etc. So that's why it is really dependent on the individual. And plenty of folks start class without tape.
And then I keep talking about it, and they're like, "Oh, I gotta get some, don't I?"
And they use what they have: masking tape, duct tape, as long as there's something to provide that tactile feedback on the floor that a mirror would provide visually to a sighted person.
I would actually argue that our learning tool is superior to the mirror, because when I have done performances, I could just put my tape down on the performance space floor. My sighted friends cannot hang up a mirror behind the audience.
I love that.
I can vouch for that. I've seen it happen.
Now, I think it was Alejandra who mentioned the orange tape being useful for students who have some vision. Krishna, are you also dancing while you're teaching?
Yes, I do. I dance and talk the whole time. And I move and I don't shut up the whole time.
And we're going to play a clip for you in a second here that shows Krishna speaking very quickly to, I believe, was it a Russian folk song or was it a Greek folk song? What's the name of it?
Was this from, you came to class 7 of intro class.
I did.
That was a Greek folk song that is called the Sirtaki. And before you play it, I just want to give some context here. Sure. This is from intro, but it's from one of the last classes of intro when we're actually doing quite challenging material. Also, I do not improvise what I'm saying. I rehearse many hours before every class in order to make sure that my voice and the music are lined up and I'm saying what I really want to say to help the students do their best. So you're hearing something that has been rehearsed for many, many, many hours. This is not something that I do just magically.
Yes, and she's dancing, she's talking, yes. And then at one point you're speaking very quickly. So let's just let the audience hear that just for a second. Shane?
First, we straighten our legs, our arms float down the low fifth, pinky fingers land on the legs, and then like wings, they gently float up out of low fifth, out to the side second, and then we do it again. Plie legs first, arms first, pull into second arabesque, right hand forward, right leg back, left arm side. Plie legs first, arms first, pull into second arabesque, left leg tiny back, left hand front, right arm side. Plie legs first, arms first, straighten the legs, arms down to low fifth, and the arms float out to the side second, and then we do it again.
Wow. It's just fascinating to watch you work as an instructor. And it really begs the question of who taught you to dance as a blind person? Because as you mentioned earlier, too often we are dismissed as students when it comes to classes in movement. I know I wanted to take a ballet class at Bryn Mawr, and the instructor's response was, "Well, who's going to teach her?" You know?
Yes.
So when I saw this class, of course, I was very excited. And of course, really excited to do this interview. So it seems like maybe you've had some very positive instructors and you've been able to sort of come up with different things.
I've had everything. Yeah. I've had good, I've had bad, I've had in between. I studied dance prior to vision loss. I started when I was 3. I received a scholarship through Royal Academy of Dance because I was the kind of 3-year-old who had long attention span. And they figured this one's worth investing time into. My first dance teacher was a really excellently trained teacher. And she had trained specifically to teach very young children. Like that was what she wanted to do. A lot of dance teachers are teaching class because they are frustrated choreographers. That was not the case for my first teacher. And if you had asked me when I was 3, what do you want to be when you grow up? Oh, I'd say a ballet teacher. So like the fact that I have the job I wanted when I was 3 still brings me a lot of joy. I have also had, it's a mixed bag. Teachers who really understood how people learn, and also teachers who are just there because they have to fulfill some kind of grant requirement, or like this is how they can make enough money to make rent or what have you. Post vision loss, much like your experience, Lizzie, I had a lot of teachers say no. I would ask, I'm like, look, I have a background. I know my vocabulary. I'm having a hard time moving right now, but can I come study here? And I got a lot of no. I don't feel comfortable with you in the room. I wouldn't know what to do. A lot of people just thinking about me would make them feel stressed. I would kind of coerce certain teachers into I'm like, please let me come and take your class. And I was an adult and I'm paying $18 for a class like everybody else, like one class at a time, open level classes in New York City, just like anyone else would. Sometimes, once I developed a certain level of competency, I would show up, fold up my white cane, and just go hang on a bar and just cross my fingers and hope no one noticed. And inevitably, very few people ever did. Like, I wouldn't make an effort to like hide the white cane as I came in, because I kind of couldn't. But then like I would just fold it and I would like tuck it with my bag or something, and then just go stand at the bar, like just behave myself, listen and dance, and no one really say a thing. It was better sometimes. I performed a lot prior to the pandemic. And, you know, when you perform and you rehearse all the time, you have to take class beforehand. Otherwise, you're going to injure yourself. So sometimes my schedule just required me to sneak in. I would say, though, in terms of studying blind specific technique, that mostly came from my mentor, Mana Hashimoto, who was a blind professional dancer, is a blind professional dancer, who taught me about taped floor technique and who really introduced me to the world of being able to sense my nervous system in a very specific way and to develop a real relationship with my nervous system as something that is me. Like, my nervous system is me. It's the part of me that thinks and experiences life. In a way, it's the part that's the most me. And yet it's also something else, some other entity that I need to tame and earn the trust of every day. I sometimes liken it to a wild bird that you have to tame every day. It's true that, like, the moment fear, stress, anxiety enters in, that dialogue with the nervous system is just interrupted, and you cannot learn anymore in that moment. You really need that calm focus and that relationship, that conscious relationship with your nervous system. That's really what Mana helped me to do. That's what I aim to do for every one of my students, to pay back what I was given so generously.
And I think you do that very well. It actually explains a lot about, you know, just even the tempo that you speak, you know, I always call it energy. You know what I mean? I remember the first time we spoke, I was visiting my parents, and my mom said, "Oh, who were you just on the phone with?" And I was so excited. And I said, this woman, she has great energy. And I was like, I'm just going to love doing this interview. But now that you give the background to it, it makes a lot of sense. So I would just say that you are doing a very good job, and your students are totally picking that up. Now, anytime. Now, as far as the teachers you mentioned, the ones who get stressed, the ones who think it's harder to teach a blind student, are there any misconceptions that you might be able to break for those teachers?
Oh, please let me do that. Okay. Thing number one, don't touch people without their permission. There is, a lot of ballet teachers think it's totally okay to just like walk up to a person, including a blind person who might not know that they're there, and just like grab their butt and like adjust their butt. Why do they think that's okay? It's not ever okay. But also, a lot of people don't want touch corrections anyway. And especially blind people don't want touch corrections. Some blind folks have a lot of like touch related traumas. Like, no, I have had enough of this. I've had enough of people grabbing my arm and touching my back and thinking that I need to be touched all the time, when that's not even the way a person learns independent movement. That doesn't even do it. It's not even the thing. So if you have a blind person in class, please don't treat them like a puppet and like move their body around. Oh God, that's number one. I know that that's very like kindergarten level. I consider it kindergarten level, but apparently to a lot of ballet teachers, it's not. Here's some other things to consider. blind and visually impaired people, we have very unique relationships with our head. And a lot of the cueing that is head related for sighted students does not really apply to us. Our relationship with our head is very individual. It's really about being allowed to explore our balance. It's very easy to know whether you feel on your balance or feel off your balance. That's something that you know about yourself. You can sense that yourself. If you know, okay, if I bring my head a little bit like this, it feels better. Or if I bring my head a little bit like that, it feels worse. That is the exploration that I encourage students to do. Like, befriend your head. It's not your enemy. To think that your blind student has to move and hold their head in the same way that the sighted people do, that will actually impede their learning. It will get in the way. It will prevent them from being able to progress, because instead of dancing like the blind person that they are, they're being forced into the mold of the sighted person. It's the same thing also with hands. I would say that my hands in particular are a lot more energized and electrified than a sighted person's hands would be when I am moving. And they're, I would say, a little bit more dramatic. But that's also the thing that helps me keep track of where my hands are in space. That relationship with the nerves in the index and the middle finger, really letting that be present and vibrant. That's what keeps me feeling confident about what I'm doing. So no, like, your blind student isn't going to look the same as your sighted student, but there is an aesthetic to the way that we dance that I don't think is any less beautiful. If anything, it's more beautiful because it is so authentic to our experience. Like, we have to be engaged in how we feel as we're in motion. It's not imitation. It's not copying. It's not, oh, I'm doing this because I was told to. It's, I know I feel my balance. I know the shape I'm in. I'm doing this and I know what I'm doing. And to me, I think that's much more exciting.
It sounds to me like a huge part of your philosophy that you just explained is accepting yourself, not
Yes.
trying to be something that you're not. And that, sort of reminds me of, if someone, is racially different from everyone else on the stage, they wouldn't want to hide that. They wouldn't want to, try to conform to being, quote, quote, just like everyone else. But in this case, being just like everyone else is not saying to be treated as less than. It's saying, embrace your individuality, embrace your uniqueness, and be confident, be happy with the style that is uniquely you. Would that be
absolutely
correct?
And that's really, like, the best dancers in the world really all have that approach. They all know their own bodies and their own movement in such an intimate way. And the fact that dance education on the whole does not reflect that reality is just absurd to me. It's absurd. Like, we all know that the great dancers of the world that, like, capture audiences' attention, and, like, people remember witnessing this incredible artist a decade later, 2 decades later. It comes from their experience and joy of, like, having a human body and being in it in the moment. It doesn't come from, oh, I'm doing this because I'm supposed to. It's always something so much more emotional than that.
I agree. Now, my final question, and then we'll just get your contact information and then wrap up, is what advice do you have for anyone who is advocating for equality in the dance space? It can be specific to ballet, or it could be just, the broader dance area? I know how you've sort of snuck into the classes for in preparation for your dance companies. But for example, if you're auditioning for a dance company, do you sort of use the same sort of like sneak in approach, or have you had those frank conversations? Or
Well, I mean, here is the facts of the matter. I've done many auditions.
Mhm.
I've never gotten a job through an audition. I've only ever gotten a job through developing like hard-won relationships with other artists. I can recall going on an audition not too many years ago for a dance company whose work I really admired. And, I came in like, what was I supposed to do? I'm obviously a blind lady coming in. And but the choreography was like, okay, all right, so I'm going to ask you to do some stuff and I'll talk to you about it as you're doing it. And, I'm following the instructions, doing it, and I'm listening to her, and she says, oh, I like the way that you dance. And I keep going, and she said, the way that you dance is actually really similar to the other dancers in my company. And then we continue on. She continues to direct me, and she says, I could actually really imagine you in the piece that I'm planning right now. But I don't want the company to go in that direction. And we know what that means, right? If you want to, and I know that there are people who do. When we are artists, we're born artists. We're born to be that person. You can't change it. You can't throw it away. You can't force yourself to be somebody else. If you are an artist, that's what you are. If you know that this is the life you need to live, understand that ableism is incredibly pervasive and it's everywhere. And you're going to experience it again and again, and it's wrong. Every time you experience it, it's wrong. Even though it's common, that doesn't make it okay. Make sure that you take the time to cultivate a network of other disabled artists that you can talk to and grow close to. Support their work. Learn to support each other, because those are the friends that you're going to need the most. I'm only here today with the class that I have currently because I have that friend in Alejandra. I would not have a website. She built that for me when I had no money. I had no income coming in at the start of the pandemic. I had nothing. And she said, I'll make a website for you because you need to be able to teach this class. It's important.
I also dragged you onto social media.
Yes. I'm like, oh God, please not Facebook. No. But this is how you're going to make it. Like, yeah, there will be moments when you're going to be in collaboration with non-disabled artists. Sometimes they will have, a competency in understanding you. A lot of times they won't. A lot of times they're going to want you to be involved in their project because they have ableist ideas. Think about that. Think about what you can emotionally handle.
I have a slightly different perspective as someone who is a wheelchair user. What I want to say is that, Krishna, you're absolutely correct, and ableism is everywhere. On the plus side, there is only one Krishna doing what Krishna does, but the culture of disability arts has been shifting over, I would say, the past 5 years.
Yeah.
So that there is more cultural awareness and space for disability arts. There are more disability-oriented projects and companies and funding. So if this is all new to you, but still something that you think you feel like you need to pursue, if you are blind and visually impaired and interested in ballet or dance in general, there are folks like Krishna. There are folks that Krishna is reaching out to and teaching. And there are other spaces and organizations that are starting to turn the tide and to understand what disability arts and culture are, and that these things can happen at a higher level, and that work should be audio described, and that we matter as both consumers of entertainment and arts and as performers or as students, as people who are just learning. So there is hope.
I am currently in the editing phase for a film project called Telephone. It is a screen dance and audio description arts project that Heather Shaw, a choreographer out in California, and I have been working on for the last 2 years. It's really a showcase of dancers and audio describers who I believe are committed to creating really excellent, high quality audio described dance for blind and visually impaired audiences. It's really about creating art with blind and visually impaired audiences at the center. And there's also a little bit of me talking about like my artistic philosophies as they apply to audio description for dance and movement. It's not the same as audio description for other kinds of media. I feel like it needs to be a very different kind of approach. So I talk a lot about that. We are working towards a premiere in December of 2022. We're really excited. This is like a disabled led and disabled honoring project. There's so many incredible artists involved, including Alejandra, including the great blind dancer DJ Robinson down in Durham, North Carolina. There are so many incredibly talented people working on this, and we're currently fundraising in order to pay all of our collaborators, including our ASL interpreter, our deaf performers, our composer, our film editor, our sound engineer. So if you are interested in learning more about that, you can always go to telephonefilm.com. And also we have a coffee page that is KO-FI, a coffee page for donations for the Telephone Film.
And before we get the contact information for Darkroom, I was going to ask quickly, Alejandra, I was going to ask you if you were an artist, but Krishna just said it. Would you like to share a little bit about your art?
So I would consider myself to currently be in arts administrator mode, but I have spent a long time sort of doing a pick and mix. As a young person, I studied vocal music. I have performed on stage in children's theater. I have returned to theater training as an adult. I work as an audio describer, which I fully believe is an art form in and of itself. So
I do also.
So I actually do a little bit of everything. Krishna and I were recently involved as remote performers in a multi-sensory performance called In Place of Catastrophe, A Clear Night Sky, which was a New York-based project with friends and colleagues of ours, which was also meant to decenter sight. So I do a little bit of everything, but I believe that my primary artistic work right now is supporting the work of Darkroom Ballet. Krishna mentioned DJ Robinson as part of Telephone Film, and Krishna has also been in collaboration with a company that DJ is a part of. So we're all just trying to promote each other and keep the art moving forward and help make a difference in art that is impactful for blind, visually impaired, and disabled people at high quality levels. So shout out to Chalet Dance Works as well, who would have premiered their work by the time this airs, but is also worth checking out.
I could not have said everything that Alejandra just said better myself.
Excellent. Well, who wants to give our listeners all of the contact information and ways that they can keep up with you on social media? Just wherever you guys are located on the internet.
I'll do it because Krishna doesn't like to do it. So as we mentioned before, the main website for Darkroom Ballet with Krishna Washburn is darkroomballet.com. All 3 words, darkroomballet.com. To simplify things, we actually link to everywhere that Krishna is on there, but Krishna is on Facebook as Darkroom Ballet with Krishna Washburn, and on Twitter and Instagram as @darkroomballet. I haven't convinced her to set up a TikTok yet, but I'm working on it. And Krishna made a very not so happy face about that. But again, darkroomballet.com is our main point of contact. We love to get email. Our main email address is info@darkroomballet.com. And that's actually how we process all of our new students and do our intake. We're very email friendly in that way.
Oh, we should also mention our Darkroom Ballet business voicemail line.
That's absolutely correct. Now I'm going to test you. Do you remember our phone number?
Oh gosh.
That's okay.
I know that it's 9.
Okay. You can also reach Darkroom Ballet by phone. It's a recorded voicemail line. I will receive those calls, and usually Krishna will return those calls. And that number, it's a US number, it's 929-367-0025. And so you can leave us a voicemail there, and we will get back to you as soon as we can.
Excellent. So it sounds like if students want to get involved, they should send an email or call the business line for signing up for classes.
Those are the best ways to go. And everything should be there on darkroomballet.com. I'm going to do a few more edits today, but as of right now, all our information is current as far as upcoming workshops and the upcoming Intro to Ballet cycle, which begins on June 25th with registration closing on June 18th.
Excellent. And before we close out, I just want to say, Krishna, TikTok needs Darkroom Ballet. So thank you both for joining us today. It's been so much fun, and you've dropped so much knowledge on everyone who is fortunate enough to tune in to today's episode. And honestly, that's what Scene Change is all about. Thank you both again, and thank you, Shane, for editing the episode as always. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. This has been another episode of Scene Change.
I'm Caitlin McIntyre, president of the National Federation of the Blind Performing Arts Division. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Scene Change. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and visit our website at nfb-pad.org. There you'll find links to our social media, membership, and resources for blind performers. Thanks to everyone who makes this show happen. Scene Change is produced by Shane Lowe, Joe Schuneman, Precious Perez, Chris Nussbaum, Seyoon Choi, and Aaron Jordan, with music by Ryan Strunk and Tom Page. Remember, you can be the performer you want. Blindness is not what holds you back. We'll see you next time.